Senator Xenophon, you've got 10 minutes.
That's very quick.
Can I just, Mr. Donald, further to Senator Forster's line of questioning in relation to the Canadian TSB review that's been undertaken. Well, sorry, this is actually a question for Mr. Murdoch. Can I just ask what parameters are in place to ensure the independence of the TSB during the review?
Senator, I think as Mr Dolan's indicated, the TSB has very strict parameters around the way in which undertakes investigations. This review is being undertaken fully, as I understand from the evidence of Mr Dolan, in accordance with the Canadian TSB's procedures. I think we rely very much on the robustness of that organisation and the way in which its executive operates to ensure the review is fully accords with the normal investigation processes. And
are you aware whether the TSB is actually looking at the way the Pellair incident was conducted?
My understanding from seeing the terms of reference that they are working to is that is one of the areas they look at in terms of the way in which, and Mr Dolan probably better placed than myself to give you an answer to that, but in terms of how the ATSB undertook that investigation into the Pellair incident and the way in which the Canadian authorities would view the way in which that investigation was underdone is part of their review.
Right, and so Mr Dolan, and I don't want in any way to compromise any review undertaken by the TSB, but was the Pellair incident, can you say whether the Pellair incident is something that is a subject and the way that the ATSB dealt with it is something that is a subject of the TSB review?
It's explicitly a subject of the TSB review, Senator.
Okay, I guess really, Mr Murdoch, you want to take this on notice whether other parties involved in the Pellair incident, particularly those that gave evidence to the Senate inquiry, have been contacted by the TSB? Or will it be apparent from their report as to whom the TSB actually contacted?
I would presume that the TSB will set out in their report, as they would any other investigative report, who they've spoken to and the circumstances of the review. But I'm happy to take that on notice in terms of, but I would imagine they'll set out in detail who they're contacting in relation to the review.
And can I just go back to Mr. Don, during the Senate inquiry into the Pellair or aviation investigations, accident investigations, there was some consideration given. I understood that the ATSB was going to revisit the issue of whether the flight data recorder could in fact be retrieved. Was that something that was considered by the ATSB at Norfolk Island, in relation to the FDR at Norfolk Island?
In the light of the References Committee's report, Senator, the ATSB did reconsider the question of the flight data recorders, and based on an assessment of the safety benefits and the likely costs, decided not to proceed with the retrieval.
But the safety benefits and the likely costs, they were matters that were previously considered.
Senator, that's true, but we reconsidered it in the light of the committee's report and its recommendation.
So there weren't any other factors that were considered in the context of retrieving the flight data recorder?
We considered in the context of the parallel recommendation about reopening the investigation, Senator, so those two played against each other in the Commission's consideration of those two recommendations.
Mr Dolan, in response to a question I placed on notice last estimates regarding the Pellair investigation, I think it was question number 142, the ATSB responded that it had no power to withdraw its report or plans to conduct a further investigation and that it stands by the finding of the report. That's the position of the ATSB?
That's correct, Senator.
During the committee inquiry into aviation accident report, I think it was in relation to a line of questioning from Senator Edwards, in fact, you stated that you were not proud of the report and that you certainly would not hold it as a benchmark.
That's correct, Senator.
So why is the ATSB standing by it, given your previous comments?
There's a difference between us not wishing to hold up the report as an exemplar of our best work and whether we consider, in terms of the Act, that the investigation is complete and therefore the report as published should stand.
But under the Act, you do have the power to reopen an investigation, don't you?
Yes, Senator, and we will when new and significant information comes to light that may be relevant to the previous investigation.
So you don't think anything that was uncovered in the context of the Senate inquiry was in any way new or significant?
I and my fellow commissioners very carefully went through the contents of the committee's report and tested it against the information we had available to us in the course of our investigation, and there was nothing in our view that constituted new and significant information that would lead to a need to reopen the investigation.
How did it go from a critical whatever incident to a don't worry about it?
Minor.
That's a matter we did rehearse with the References Committee, Senator, and in short, our initial assessment of the issue of guidance as to dealing with a situation where weather deteriorates from what was planned, we over-assessed it as critical at an early stage, and by applying our methodologies concluded by the end of the process that it constituted a minor safety issue.
Can I commend you that you look really well? You look less stressed than you used to for some reason.
That's the lack of the beard, probably, Senator.
But that particular incident of which I just spoke, no thinking person would believe that bureaucratic answer. I mean, you can't go from a critical incident to a minor or whatever it was without something happening on the journey. But anyhow, we won't go back there. But to any sensible person, that sounds like a bloody either a cover-up or a balls up.
Through you, Chair. Mr Dolan, given that there was no new or, in your view, in the view of the ATSB, no new or significant information arising out of the Senate inquiry.
New and significant.
New and significant. So it has to be both new and significant. I understand the threshold that the ATSB has set in respect to that. Is this something that was considered by the board of the ATSB?
By the three commissioners who legally constitute the ATSB, yes, Senator.
Right. And in considering that, how much time was given to consider that at its meeting?
We set aside the bulk of our one-day meeting as a formal meeting as a commission to working through the range of recommendations of the committee's report, both to inform our input to a government response and to look at what steps we needed to take to learn from the Pell Air investigation and the investigations of the committee. Can
you indicate whether you provided advice to the government as to why you thought there was nothing new and significant arising out of the Senate inquiry report, with a view to reopening the investigation or reconsidering your findings?
The advice that we provided through the department to the government is decision-making advice for the government. I'm not sure I'm in a position to comment on that, Senator.
But did you actually, well, I'm not asking you for the content of that advice, but I'm asking you whether you in fact provided advice as to whether you ought to reopen in any way the ATSB's report into the Pell Air incident. Sorry?
Senator, I don't think you can discuss the content or the
I'm not asking for the content.
The inference to be drawn as to what the advice was about. If there was advice, well, there was advice.
But I'm just trying to establish whether there was advice on this particular issue. I'm not asking for an inference as to whether there was advice one way or the other, as to whether there was any.
Well, I think departments provide advice on all manner of issues. I think you can assume that they did.
I'm just trying to establish that from Mr Dolan, whether he actually...
Excuse me?
That's right, no.
Over to you.
Senator, as I indicated, the Commission considered for its own purposes the question of whether to reopen the investigation, and our consideration was also informed the nature of our advice to government about what we would see as an appropriate response to the report.
Right. Now that the TSB, the Canadian TSB, is looking at the ATSB and in particular, given the terms of reference, the Pell Air incident and the way the ATSB conducted itself, is the ATSB still open to a reopening, either a withdrawal of its report or conducting a further investigation or reconsidering its report as a result of any findings by the Canadian TSB?
There's 2 points, Senator. As I tried to make clear in response to the question on notice, legally speaking, we cannot withdraw a report. We can amend a report, but we're not in a position to withdraw
Sorry,
it.
but would you consider amending the report? You haven't considered to do so on the basis of the Senate inquiry and its report, but is that something that will be considered in the context of the Canadian TSB report?
The threshold test remains, Senator. If there is new and significant information that is relevant to the investigation, then we have not just a power but a responsibility to reopen the investigation.